Douglas. Picture this. You're one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. You've already survived divorce, addiction, a threat against your family, and a broken bone from a skiing wreck. And then one morning you wake up with a sore spot at the back of your mouth. You shrug it off. Everybody does, right? Except this time, that little ache was about to blow up your entire life. This is the story of how Hollywood royalty nearly lost everything, and somehow came out the other side. Let's rewind to late 2009. Michael Douglas, two-time Oscar winner, the guy who practically defined the word leading man, starts feeling something off in his throat. Not dramatic, just there, annoying. The kind of thing you figure will go away on its own. It didn't. He went to doctor after doctor, and here's the part that'll make your blood boil. They missed it. Not once, not twice, 3 separate times. Physicians looked him over and sent him home with the wrong answer. It wasn't until he saw a specialist in Montreal that someone finally found it, a tumor sitting at the base of his tongue, and by then, it had already ballooned to roughly the size of a walnut. The diagnosis: stage 4 cancer. Let that sink in for a second. Stage 4. For most people, hearing those 2 words feels like the ground disappearing beneath their feet. For an actor whose entire career runs through his voice, his face, his ability to hold a room, it was almost unthinkable. In August of 2010, Douglas went public. But here's a twist nobody expected. He didn't actually tell the world the full truth. His doctors advised him to say it was throat cancer, not tongue cancer, because if the treatment failed and surgery became necessary, that surgery could permanently wreck his jaw, his face, even his ability to speak. So for years, the public knew half the story. He wouldn't reveal the real diagnosis until 2013, once the dust had settled. Now imagine being married to this man while all of this unfolds. That's exactly where Catherine Zeta-Jones found herself, an accomplished actress in her own right, and at the time, 25 years younger than her husband. She was furious, and honestly, who wouldn't be? Her husband had gone to doctor after doctor pleading for help, and 3 times he'd been turned away with the wrong diagnosis. Precious time had been lost, and she never let that go quietly. The treatment that followed was brutal. 8 weeks of chemotherapy stacked with radiation, hammering his head and neck day after day. Swallowing became agony. Eating turned into a battle he often lost. His weight collapsed. He dropped close to 40 pounds. And the man audiences had watched command the screen for decades suddenly looked frail, almost unrecognizable. Radiation to that part of the body doesn't just hurt going down. It lingers, burning and aching long after each session ends. Through it all, Catherine stayed by his side. She scaled back her own work, showed up for every rough day, and tried to hold the family together for their 2 young kids, all while watching the man she loved shrink in front of her. That kind of pressure doesn't just disappear when a doctor eventually says, "The tumor's gone." It builds, it compounds, and it doesn't always show up right away. Sure enough, once Michael's health started turning a corner in early 2011, something else cracked. In April of that year, Catherine quietly checked herself into a treatment facility to get support for bipolar II disorder. 2 years later, in 2013, she went back again. Proof that this wasn't a one-time stumble, but an ongoing fight she was managing in the background the entire time, even while playing caretaker to her husband. By August 2013, the strain finally became public. Representatives for the couple confirmed that Michael and Catherine were taking a break, spending time apart to figure out where their 13-year marriage actually stood. It was the most serious crack anyone had seen in their relationship, and after everything they'd survived, the cancer, the mental health battles, the constant media spotlight, a lot of people assumed this was the end. But Michael refused to call it that. He was upfront in interviews, saying flat out that they weren't divorced, and that the door to working things out was still very much open. Catherine, on the other hand, played it close to the chest, staying mostly silent and letting her actions speak instead. And by the close of 2013, cracks started closing instead of widening. They began appearing together again in public, And Michael openly admitted something a lot of long-married couples know deep down. A marriage doesn't just survive on autopilot. It takes constant work, constant choosing each other, especially after you've been through hell together. Here's a fun little detail. Michael and Catherine actually share the exact same birthday, September 25th, just a generation apart. That 25-year age gap had always drawn attention, but after a cancer scare that could have ended his life, it took on a heavier meaning, forcing both of them to think hard about mortality and time. Now, let's back up, because the cancer and the marriage rocky patch weren't the only storms this family weathered. Long before Catherine came into the picture, Michael was married to Deandra Luker, starting in 1977. Their son, Cameron Douglas, was born the following year, Michael's first child. That marriage stretched on for nearly 2 decades, before quietly falling apart in the mid-90s, with the divorce officially finalized in 2000. It was one of the priciest splits Hollywood had seen at that point, with Deandra reportedly walking away with somewhere around $45 million. Barely any time passed before Michael married Catherine that same year, in November 2000. But even as his new chapter began, Cameron's life was spiraling. He struggled with drug addiction for years, and it eventually caught up with him legally. Cameron was arrested and later sentenced to 5 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to charges tied to drug distribution and heroin possession. His time behind bars actually got extended after further drug-related incidents inside prison. For Michael, watching his own son go through that was gut-wrenching. He visited Cameron regularly, and later admitted, with real honesty, that his relentless career had pulled him away from being the father he wanted to be. And then there was the threat that hit even closer to home. A woman named Dawnette Knight became fixated on Michael and sent a string of disturbing, threatening messages aimed directly at Catherine. It was serious enough to end up in court. Catherine later spoke about how deeply it shook her sense of safety. Knight eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to prison, closing the legal chapter, but not erasing the fear it left behind. On top of all of that, Michael battled his own demons with alcohol. Back in 1992, at the height of his fame, he checked into a treatment center in Arizona, later admitting openly that drinking had become a real problem for him. Add to that, a serious skiing accident in the early 80s that sidelined him for a long recovery stretch, right as his career was taking off. And you start to see the full picture. This wasn't a man who coasted through stardom untouched. Every high point came stitched together with a private struggle most fans never saw. So how does a story like this end? Actually, better than you'd expect. Michael kept up with regular checkups to watch for any cancer coming back, and doctors gave him genuinely good odds. He didn't retreat from Hollywood either. In 2013, he came back swinging with his role in Behind the Candelabra, playing Liberace in a performance that critics adored, and that eventually earned him an Emmy. Think about that for a second. A role like that, delivered after fighting for his life just a couple of years earlier. That's not just a comeback, that's defiance. He didn't stop there. Michael went on to reach a whole new generation of fans through the Marvel films, stepping into the role of Hank Pym and introducing himself to viewers who'd never seen his earlier dramatic work. Meanwhile, his marriage to Catherine kept healing. They started showing up together again, vacations, red carpets, family milestones, proving that their rough patch hadn't been the ending everyone feared. In November 2025, the couple hit an incredible milestone: 25 years of marriage. 25 years that included cancer, mental health battles, a very public separation, and constant tabloid scrutiny, and they made it through together. Catherine still shares family photos and sweet birthday messages for him, and Michael's been just as open about how much he values her. Their story isn't about a picture-perfect marriage. It's about two people choosing, again and again, to stick it out. These days, now in his 80s, some Michael's slowed way down. He said publicly that he hasn't taken on new acting work since 2022, and isn't chasing projects just to stay relevant. He's not slamming the door shut completely. He said he'd still consider something truly special if it came along. But his priorities have clearly shifted toward family, and the people he loves. After everything he's survived, that shift makes total sense. When you've stared down stage 4 cancer, you tend to stop chasing the wrong things. So what do you take away from a story like this? Maybe it's that the people we see as untouchable, the award winners, the household names, are dealing with the exact same fears, losses, and second chances the rest of us are. Michael Douglas didn't just survive cancer. He rebuilt a marriage, repaired a relationship with his son, and kept reinventing his career well into his 70s. If that's not proof that it's never too late to turn things around, I don't know what is. Here's something else worth sitting with. For years, most of the public only knew the sanitized version of this story. They knew throat cancer. They knew Hollywood couple splits. They didn't know about the 3 missed diagnoses, the walnut-sized tumor, the 8 brutal weeks of treatment, or the quiet trips to a treatment facility that Catherine took to protect her own mental health. It's a reminder that the headlines we scroll past rarely capture what a family actually goes through behind closed doors. Fame doesn't buy immunity from any of that. If anything, it just adds a spotlight to problems everyone else gets to work through in private. And think about the timing of it all. Michael was fighting for his life at the exact moment Catherine needed him to be strong for their kids. Then, right as he started to recover, she was the one who needed support. Illness in a family rarely waits its turn. It piles up, one crisis stacking on top of the last, and somehow this couple kept showing up for each other anyway. That's not a small thing. Plenty of marriages don't survive even one of those chapters, let alone all of them combined. It's also worth remembering that Cameron's struggles were unfolding in parallel with everything else. While Michael was undergoing chemo, his own son was serving time in federal prison, dealing with an addiction that had spiraled out of control years earlier. Michael has been candid about the guilt he carried over that. The sense that his relentless work schedule during Cameron's childhood might have left a gap he couldn't fill later. Watching your child struggle while you're fighting cancer yourself sounds like something out of a screenplay. Except this was real life, playing out for the Douglas family all at once. What makes the ending of this story land, though, is that none of it was inevitable. Michael could have easily let the diagnosis end his career. He could have let the separation from Catherine become permanent. He could have let the guilt over Cameron eat him alive. Instead, he kept choosing to show up. For the work, for his marriage, for his son. That Emmy-winning turn in Behind the Candelabra wasn't just a great performance. It was a statement that he wasn't done. That cancer didn't get the last word. So what do you take away from a story like this? Maybe it's that the people we see as untouchable, the award winners, the household names, are dealing with the exact same fears, losses, and second chances the rest of us are. Michael Douglas didn't just survive cancer. He rebuilt a marriage, repaired a relationship with his son, and kept reinventing his career well into his 70s. If that's not proof that it's never too late to turn things around, I don't know what is. If this story hit you the way it hit me, drop a like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because trust me, there are plenty more stories like this one waiting to be told. Bonnie Tyler.